a talented but complicated player whose strange career was part soap opera, part mystery thriller, part Shakespearean drama. Through it all, Walton won 2 Stanley Cups, dominated the WHA, and is the only NHL player traded on the recommendation of a psychologist. Walton played alongside some of the game's greatest legends and some of its most notorious oddballs. Here's the story of the enigma that was Mike Shakey Walton, one of hockey's most unforgettable characters.
Well, whatever the wildest thing that Randy Moss could think of doing wouldn't even make the book on Shakey Walton.
A native of Kirkland Lake, Ontario, Mike Walton inherited his nickname Shakey from his father, Bob Walton, who would shake his head to throw off opponents as a standout hockey player in England. Mike Walton first played junior hockey with the famed St. Michael's Majors in 1961-62, with a team that eventually won the Memorial Cup. The St. Michael's program was discontinued in 1962 and the players transferred to McNeil Catholic Secondary School, where Walton scored 22 goals in 38 games as the Maroons won the Metro Junior A League Championship. For the 1963-64 season, Walton joined the Toronto Marlboros, and he continued to progress with 41 goals and 92 points in 53 games. He added 26 points in 12 playoff games as the Marlboros brought home the second Memorial Cup of Walton's young career. Mike's first pro season came in the Central Pro League for the Tulsa Oilers in 64-65, where he was named the CPHL's Rookie of the Year. He also made the first All-Star team, recording 40 goals and 84 points in 68 games. The next season, Mike was again selected as Rookie of the Year, this time in the AHL, playing for the Rochester Americans. He piled up 35 goals and 86 points in 68 games and was rewarded with a brief 6-game NHL call-up to Toronto. Walton returned to Rochester for the playoffs, and he led the Americans to the 1966 Calder Cup Championship. After winning 2 consecutive Rookie of the Year awards, Mike was now one of the top prospects in hockey. But Maple Leafs coach Punch Imlach demoted him back to Rochester after just 1 exhibition game in 1966. In an era when players were expected to do what they were told, times were changing, and Walton refused to play in Rochester until his contract was renegotiated, as he sought a raise from $9,000 per season to $13,000. He then led a walkout with 3 additional disgruntled youngsters, Cowboy Bill Flett, Eddie the Jet Joyelle, and Gary Suitcase Smith. Eventually, the matter was resolved, and he split the season between Rochester and Toronto, playing 31 NHL games and joining fellow youngsters Ron Ellis and Peter Stemkowski on the, quote, Old Fellows Athletic Club that captured the famous 1967 Stanley Cup Championship. Walton's 4 goals and 7 points were key to the Leafs' Stanley Cup run. By 1967-68, Mike had established himself as a surefire NHLer when he scored 30 goals in his first full season. He was also selected to the NHL's mid-season All-Star team.
Tipping it to Mahavlich, comes back to Hillman, a backhand in front of the net. Here's Walton, they score! Whoa!
Find big deals at Best Buy this Memorial Day.
But his outgoing and outspoken style angered Maple Leafs management, particularly coach Punch Imlach and team president Stafford Smythe. Also at issue was the fact that Walton's agent was Alan Eagleson, who helped establish the NHL Players Association. Further complicating matters was Walton's marriage to Smythe's niece and Conn Smythe's granddaughter, Candace. Walton eventually quit the Leafs, and he was suspended, but NHL Commissioner Clarence Campbell reversed the decision. On the recommendation of a league-appointed psychiatrist named Dr. Ron Stokes, the Leafs agreed to trade Walton, who was diagnosed with depression. Although he now had a reputation as being moody, streaky, and difficult to coach, he remained in high demand throughout the rest of the NHL. On February 1, 1971, he was finally traded in a blockbuster 3-way deal that saw Walton, Bruce Gamble, and a first-round draft pick shipped to the Philadelphia Flyers for a second-round draft pick in 1971, which turned out to be Rick Kehoe, and goaltender Bernie Parent. The same day, Philadelphia shipped Walton to Boston for Denny Schock and Rick McLeish. In 1971, The Boston Bruins were the kings of New England, and the local media was waiting for Walton as soon as he arrived in Boston.
Mike, how do you feel?
Just fantastic. Couldn't be happier. Nothing nicer has ever happened to me in the world.
What was your reaction when you talked to Milt Schmidt last night?
Well, it took Milt about 5 minutes to convince me that it was actually him. I thought it was Al Eagleson playing a joke on me, and because 5 minutes before Milt phoned me that Gregory got off the line and said I was going to Philadelphia, and then Milt phoned 5 minutes later, and I was definitely in disbelief. Well, it's really quite complicated, but basically it boiled down to them thinking that I was basically a power play specialist, and I felt the money that they were paying me was a lot of money, and I felt I should be doing something more than just playing every other shift or something like that. And this kind of a thing sort of started to bother me, and I felt that I had accomplished many things in the National Hockey League and in the minors that would prove that I definitely wouldn't have to really prove myself every shift I went out on the ice, and this would have boiled down to when I would go out and make a mistake, then the next shift I wouldn't get on, and I had lost my confidence and things like that, and they felt that they were using me the way they wanted to, but I felt different, and that's what it really boiled down to.
The 1970-71 Bruins roster was deep and talented. Mike fought for ice time and scored just 3 goals in 28 games. But he regained his confidence and scoring touch in 1971-72 with 28 goals and 56 points. He also collected another 12 points in 15 playoff games as the Bruins swept to the Stanley Cup Championship.
Esposito away nicely. 3-on-2 to Walton. Score! Back to Orr. Over to Walton. Drive. Score!
Another bonus for Mike in Boston was becoming teammates with good friend Bobby Orr, with whom he owned the popular Orr-Walton sports camps in Orilla, Ontario. Walton raced off to a hot start in 1972-73, scoring 21 goals by mid-season. Unfortunately, his career year was ruined by a frightening accident at the team hotel in St. Louis when, during some horseplay, Walton was tripped and crashed through a plate glass door. He suffered severe cuts, which required 200 stitches, and he lost 5 pints of blood, which put his life in jeopardy for a time. He'd recover in time to finish the season, but he'd scored just 4 goals in the final 16 games. Walton loved Boston, but when his contract expired, he turned down the Bruins' 3-year, $330,000 contract offer, and he jumped to the World Hockey Association's Minnesota Fighting Saints, who offered him a 3-year deal at $500,000. As a bonus, the Saints also signed Mike's brother, Rob Walton. The freewheeling Mike Walton was a perfect match for the wide-open WHA, and expectations were high as he was introduced by head coach Harry Neal.
I'd like you to meet Mike Walton, who I think is the most exciting offensive hockey player to ever play professional hockey in the state of Minnesota. And Mike, I have gone out on a limb and kind of predicted that you'll be close to that 50-goal mark this year. What are your feelings on that?
Well, I sure hope so, Harry. It's going to be a big season, and I'm looking forward to it. And I think if I don't score 50, I'm going to be disappointed in myself, and I don't want that. So,
freed of any defensive responsibilities or ice time limitations, Walton exceeded all expectations in 73-74, recording 6 hat tricks on his way to a league-leading 57 goals. In addition, he earned 60 assists for a total of 117 total points and won the Bill Hunter Trophy as the WHA's leading scorer. Interestingly, only 9 of his goals came in the power play, but an additional 9 were scored while the Saints were shorthanded. Walton was also named MVP of the WHA All-Star Game in St. Paul, scoring 3 goals in front of a big home crowd. But aside from that game, the streaky Walton did not score a goal in the month of January, but he made up for it with a torrid late-season surge.
And scored.
I remember that year I won the scoring championship that I went a period of 13 games without a goal, and they were going crazy. I mean, they were booing me and everything, you know, wanting to lynch me. And then I scored 11 goals in 3 games, and the love affair was back on.
The Fighting Saints learned that there was never a dull moment with Shakey. One day after practice, he jumped into a hotel swimming pool wearing his full practice gear. He sank to the pool's bottom under the weight of his waterlogged equipment until teammates had to rescue him. In San Diego, Walton was sued for assault after a fan accused him of clobbering him with a stick during a game versus the San Diego Mariners. And during one game, Walton even had a fistfight with a teammate, leaving referee Bill Friday perplexed about whether to assess a penalty. During the 1974 playoffs, the Fighting Saints defeated the Edmonton Oilers in 5 games before engaging in a bare-knuckle war with Gordie Howe's Houston Aeros in a series which saw Houston win in 6 games. This bloody series introduced the hockey world to the unique talents of Gordie Machine Gun Gallant and Billy Goldthorpe, who would soon be immortalized as the model for Ogie Oglethorpe in the film Slapshot.
For a limited time, save up to $500 on select Tempur-Pedic adjustable mattress sets.
Say goodbye to old, costly cable TV once and for all. This revolutionary invention gives you access to your favorite channels and movies completely free of charge. Greedy cable corporations are trying
down the side boards with the puck, and next thing I know, right around the penalty box, my nose was broken, bleeding. My nose was over here. I turned around and it was John Chella was there, and I believe that was him that did it. And I went crazy, and I shouldn't have, but I started trying to get it with my stick and chasing him and this and that. And so I got a 10-minute misconduct, a game misconduct, and it was, basically thrown out of the game. So Goldie Goldthorpe went in to serve the penalty. So before he goes in the box, he's skating around, he says, "Shakey, don't worry about it, I'll get him." So when the penalty clock was up for him to come back on the ice, my time was served, the penalty keeper says to him, "Goldie, don't forget your stick and gloves." He says, "I don't need them, I'll be back." And he went out onto the ice without his gloves and the stick, chased John Chella, who was his cousin, all around the rink. The people went crazy, and John was just skating as fast as he could, trying to hide behind guys and all that, because he knew how crazy Goldie was. And finally, he had found himself behind the net, and Goldie in front, and Goldie had a charge. He jumped over the net and grabbed him, and they had a big beef, beat the crap out of him. And that's what happened on that night. But it was a classic. He was an unbelievable character.
The Saints ultimately lost the series 4-2, with the finale on home ice in St. Paul. A devastated Walton bolted from the arena to drown his sorrows in a local tavern, all while remaining in full uniform.
We got upset and we lost, I think it was a playoff game, and we were heading to the dressing room. He took a right turn through the garage and put his skates on, and sparks were flying all the way to his car, jumped in his car and took off.
Jumped in the car with my gloves and my skates, all my whole full uniform on, and drove out of the building downtown St. Paul, right into one of my favorite bars downtown. Went in there, double parked, went in the car, had about 4 or 5 double rum and cokes, and the people in there it was packed, and they were screaming, yelling, going nuts, and signing autographs. Got in, downed all the drinks, went out of the building, right home, and pouted.
Walton's mood would improve in the offseason thanks to a walk-away clause in his Saints contract that allowed him to leave the team after 1 year. The franchise renegotiated his contract and extended it for 5 years at a substantial increase. Prior to the 1974-75 campaign, Walton was chosen to play for Team Canada in the 1974 Summit Series versus the Soviet Union. But his play was so uninspired, he was pulled from the lineup in Games 6 and 7, and he ended the series with just 1 assist in 6 games. The 1974-75 WHA season would see the Fighting Saints further commit to toughness by adding the likes of Kurt Brackenberry, Bill Butters, and 3 bespectable kids from Virginia, Minnesota, the Carlson brothers, who began the season in the North American League with the Johnstown Jets. For some reason, the 5'8" Walton decided to test the toughest Carlson brother, Jack, in a preseason game between the Saints and the Jets.
Shakey Walton goes in the corner with my younger brother Steve and drills him. I step in there and let Shakey have one right in the mug. And it was like turning on a faucet.
I skated as hard as I could towards Jack. I was going to drop my gloves, and I woke up about a half hour later. He just broke my nose from one side, the other dropped me.
I thought, my gosh, this could be, here's a superstar player. And I walked up to him and I wanted to talk about, but how do you approach him? I said, gee, Shakey, you suppose there could be any hard feelings from that? He said, God, I hope not.
Walton's second season with Minnesota was nearly as successful as his first, as he scored 48 goals and 93 points, plus an additional 10 goals and 17 points in 12 playoff games. As usual, Walton could either be the best or the worst player on the ice, depending on his mood.
Walton was signed on the recommendation of Harry Neal.
You're all right at next shift there, Shake?
I guarantee you he'll get us 50 goals. And not only that, 20 of them will be the most spectacular goals you ever saw in your life, shorthanded and everything else. And he's just an electrifying player for the crowd. And that's exactly what he was.
One of the best skaters I've ever seen in my life, when he decided to skate, we're talking about rocket fuel. He could just fly.
Nicknamed Shakey, Walton was talented and eccentric.
He was a character, a very talented hockey player. But he was a character, I'll say that. You never knew what Shakey was going to do.
Shakey's problem, great team guy. Shakey's problem was that, he used a lot of unleaded regular, too. And that unleaded regular fuel, he'd go out there and float around a lot.
He would take the odd night off once in a while when he didn't feel like playing. And so Harry and I would get together, and we finally had to convince him. How many coaches have sat down with their players like this, say, look, Mike, we know you're going to take a night off once in a while, but you can't do it here at home.
People came to see Mike Walton, amongst a few others, but that's the guy they came to see. He was a star. He had the highest paycheck, and he drew the people, and he could score goals. He would hang out at the red line and didn't play defense. If you get him the puck, and he'd just sail in there and score.
The 1975-76 edition of the Minnesota Fighting Saints was their best yet, as they added legends Davey Keon and Johnny McKenzie, plus rookie Paul Holmgren. Walton scored at his usual pace, and the Saints were championship contenders. Unfortunately, Saints ownership was unable to pay the bills, and the team went without salaries for several weeks. The Saints finally disbanded in February of 1976, but Walton had already departed for the NHL Vancouver Canucks, who had acquired his rights to the Boston Bruins in 1974.